This video is brought to you by Squarespace.
Grinding. I don't mean getting dirty wind on or trying to get a 99 skill cape. I'm talking handrails, walls, ledges, curbs. In today's video, we're going to look at who was first to butter up a rail and hit a grind, and how this seemingly simple move has completely transformed extreme sports. A quick disclaimer, all these stunts are performed by professionals. Do not try any of this yourself. Oh yeah, I've got contact lenses now. This is my face. Right, so our story starts in the 70s in Dogtown, California. These original skateboarders like Tony Alva, Peggy Oki, Jay Adams, they would ride these swimming pools as if they were waves, like gnarly surfer dudes. But every so often they would fly just a little too close to the sun. The wheels would hit the top of the ledge, their board would go flying, chip someone's tooth, they themselves would get a face full of concrete, but in amongst all this mayhem, a new trick was accidentally stumbled upon.
Kick turns into a frontside aerial. More frontside kick turns. A grinder, but he didn't make it.
The grinder, as it was called. This would become the basis of what is kind of known as the backside slash. But we gotta just take 1 second here to appreciate that these skateboarders had the worst setups ever. I mean, they were literally skating on these boards that looked like a fence panel with wheels on. But you see, as impressive as it was, something was missing from these grinds. But around the early 80s, and in as early as 1981, we would see a clip from a man named David Z, where for about a millisecond, we would see him grind above the coping.
Back and forth with a lot of tricks above coping.
Dwayne Peters, again in 1981, was also doing a type of tail slide. I mean, I don't want to be the one to say it, but he was putting his hands down, but we'll let him get away with it. In 1985, we would see Christian Hosey buttering up a delicious board slide across the coping. And as you can see, grinding became more and more of a thing throughout the late 80s. But let's just stop here for a second, because I'm not about to go through who invented every single skateboarding grind. We'd be here for the next month and I'd start a war in the comments. But look, of all these grinds that were being invented, something was very clearly missing. The handrail. This seemingly mundane piece of street furniture would become the next great leap forward for the future of the grind. Around 1986, at the NSA Ocean Attack Contest, a skater by the name of Natas Kalpas does the unimaginable and attempts a grind down a handrail. The entire audience stood there stunned. This would have been like seeing a man walk on water. And as this audience of skaters collected themselves for a second, they realised he didn't actually land it. And so the race was on to be the first person ever to land a grind on a handrail on a skateboard.
Before we go any further with this video, I want to give a massive shout out to Squarespace for sponsoring. Squarespace is the #1 platform for building and developing a website. Every time I've had to make my own websites in the past, I've always gone for Squarespace. Mainly because I'm not very technical myself and it's just very easy to use. Whatever your business is, whatever it is you do, whether you sell products or maybe you're just an artist and you want to show off your portfolio, Squarespace has a wide range of templates for you to choose from and customize perfectly to suit your brand. The platform is so intuitive and very easy to use. You don't need to be some expert to make a website. And on top of templates, there are a ton of built-in features. You've got things like email marketing, e-commerce, appointment scheduling, members-only content, and much more. So check out Squarespace through the link below and use the code Jimmy the Giant to get 10% off your first purchase of a website or a domain. Anyway, back to the video.
What happened after this event was that Natas and the Gons went to a handrail by a beach. They skated up to the handrail, ollied up, board slide down it, landed it, but no one thought to film it or take a picture. So cheers, lads, for that. So I was on a quest to try and find out where was the first recorded evidence of a handrail grind. And I found this great video by a channel called Rad Rap Video, who actually makes the claim that there was this mysterious skateboarder out there by the name of Street Scott. If you go around telling people that your name's Street anything, I get a strange mental image of what you might be like. Street Scott was photographed in 1985 hitting a handrail, but there was very little information as to whether he ollied up onto that handrail, whether he landed it, did he do a caveman into it. No one really knows, but if you notice, it was in 1985, putting it before Natas's first attempt in that competition in 1986.
You and Natas are credited with the first handrail together, same session.
Well, I mean, this Street Scott, but you do.
But anyway, in 1986, Johnny Kopp becomes the first ever skateboarder to have a published image in a magazine where he's doing a handrail grind. In June 1987, the Gons is photographed doing an ollie into a board slide and landing it. And by now, the race was truly on. Like, skateboarding had just become infatuated with handrail grinds. People had gone from like kissing the end of a handrail on the cheek to doing these long handrails with kinks and turns and all sorts. The Gons and Natas became these two like pioneers for grinds. Like the amount of tricks they invented and the way they pushed and evolved the grind completely changed the sport. However, all this does leave one unanswered question. Which sport would come along next to adopt the grind? Well, from my research, I could track down two main contenders: BMX and snowboarding. In the 80s, BMX was basically just racing. Like, you cruise around with the boys, you got everyone flying around, land on each other. But towards the later end of the 80s, BMXs started to enter the skate parks. A website by the name of 23mag.com, they state that the first ever BMX grind was done in 1988 by a man named Albert Ocampo. We'd see him doing what is known as a feeble grind. Shortly after this, in 1989, we'd see the pedal grind by Gene Somsus. So you wouldn't be dumb to think that BMX was second. But let's head over to the slopes. An iconic snowboarding manufacturer and team called Sim Snowboarding, they had released a video in the year 1988, where we would see them also doing grinds, or as it's known in snow sports as jibbing. Not gonna lie, grind sounds cooler. So who was first? Was it Albert or was it Sim Snowboarding? Well, Albert is claimed to have done it in the summer of 88, whereas from what I could find out at least, the snowboarding video was filmed in 88 and 87. And snowboarding is in the winter. And on top of that, no one claims that this is the first ever snowboard jib. It's very possible people were doing it before this. So I'm gonna make a very bold claim here. I'm gonna go out on a limb and say that I reckon it was probably snowboarding that was first. A lot of snowboarders came directly from skateboarding, so the trick crossover would have been there. So to me, it just seems a bit more logical that snowboarding probably was first, but we'll never know for sure. But look, that's just hitting a grind or a jib. There is something that's more important than that. Which one of the two was first to hit a handrail? It's well documented that in 1990, Matt Hoffman hit the first ever double peg grind on a BMX. That's like, surely, seeing as snowboarding didn't have handrails because the snow parks didn't pop up until like the late 90s, then it must have been impossible for a snowboarder to hit a handrail before a BMXer, right? Well, I put my head torch on and I went digging deep into the snowboarding archives, and I dug up one video by the name of TB1, Totally Bored One, where we would see two snowboarders hit a handrail of sorts in the year, you guessed it, 1990. So I don't even know what to do here. I mean, we don't know the date of this snowboarding grind. It's really hard to put it, but I'm gonna say I reckon the first ever handrail was probably Matt Hoffman. And that's because his handrail was down a stair set. Like, that's the traditional handrail we all think of. And in snowboarding, it would take a little while before we'd see legit down handrail jibs. Alright, now that that's out of the way, very shortly after all of this, one sport would pop up that would have an infatuation with grinds unlike any other, and that was rollerblading. On November 21st, 1991, Chris Edwards hits the jankiest frontside grind down a handrail that I've ever seen. He basically fell over and just barely landed it, but this single clip would set the trajectory of rollerblading away from just spinning around in circles on flat ground into an almost unhealthy obsession with grinds for the next 30 years to come. Like, the sport of rollerblading literally became doing grinds. But if you look really closely at Chris's first ever grind, you'll notice something. And that is that his pair of rollerblades were not designed to be grinded on. The original rollerbladers had to like MacGyver their rollerblades to make them able to slightly grind. But like, the rollerblade manufacturers caught wind that people were doing these crazy things, and by the mid-90s they introduced the sole plate. And from there it was game over. You'd have people like Arlo Eisenberg, John Julio, Brian Aragon, Chris Haffey, who I believe holds the world record for the longest grind on anything ever, being 666 feet, which he did twice.
666 rail.
666. 666 rail? What does that mean?
Because it's 666 feet long. Yeah, that's me. It was a past life though. That was like 8 or 9 years ago.
Can you still do it?
Probably. I don't see why not.
Evolving into the modern day world of rollerblading, where they cook up these delicious grinds that are so tasty you could find them on a menu at a Michelin star restaurant. But then, after all this, we have the stragglers. You know, the ones that were a little bit late to the party. Whilst everyone else was getting the PlayStation 5, they'd just bought the PS1. First off, we'll start with skiing. Basically, because skiing was so closely intertwined with the Olympics and all these strict rule sets, it was seen as the far more serious snow sport, as opposed to its hippie stoner cousin that was snowboarding. And the first example of grinding or jibbing that I could find in skiing wouldn't come until like the 2000s. In the year 2000, Level 1 Productions would put out their video called Balance, and once they got into doing jibs, they would get good at them very quickly. Like, now the level's insane. And so they would discover grinds and push the level to insane places. Now Now we're into the early 2000s, and you're getting the real stragglers. In the year 2000s, the scooter manufacturer Razor released one of its commercials, in which we would see them doing grinds. You could also see grinds in the 2000s game that was made by Razor. They were definitely doing it before the year 2000s, but this was the earliest I could find on video. But it's crazy what grinds on a scooter has evolved into. Like Ryan Williams did a front flip into a grind. Extreme unicycling even picked up grinds in 2005. Extreme pogo even picked up grinds. The earliest video I could find was a video called Moto Stick 5, which came out in 2006. But I don't think this was the first ever grind, but it's the first I could find on video. The world of skimboarding would get on grinds in the early 2000s. Wakeboarding was seemingly a little bit earlier. I could find a video that came out in 1996 where someone did a sort of grind along a dock, but it was more around the early to mid 2000s where they would actually make features to be grinded on. Look, we got ripsticks, one-wheelers, snakeboards. Honestly, if it can be grinded on, it has been. But there is one sport that has a slippery history with grinding, and that's parkour. Parkour came along in the early 2000s, and it was kind of the odd one out. With no grindable element, they had to sit quietly in the corner whilst the big kids were having fun. But that didn't stop the world of parkour from plucking up the courage to try. Around 2012, a guy by the name of Florian Hartwagner dropped a video called Do It, Slip and Slide. But of course, this was only enabled because of the snow. By 2014, Jesse LaFleur would introduce the controversial shin slide. I mean, I personally thought it was sick, but a lot of people talked a lot of shit about this. In 2015, Daniel Illabaka was hitting like backside grinds. He actually has a history in rollerblading. He's sponsored by Rollerblade now, but he was doing it on what I'm gonna guess was a wet rail. But no one was ever able to do it in more of a legit way than Janis Shower. In 2018, he would release a video where he was doing multiple different grinds in runs with nothing but a pair of shoes, some water, and sometimes some oil. By 2019, he had completely finessed them. Like, he was doing insane things with grinds. In the opening clip for Capstone's London video, he would hit a Kong to a rail, frontside grind down it at height. But you see, other than Janis and a few other people, grinds in parkour aren't really a thing. And that's because the equipment doesn't really allow for it. But I have a slight feeling that that is about to change. In 1997, soap shoes were released. I mean, literally, it was just a gimmick. It was a plate in your shoe that you could do a frontside grind, and it died off entirely very shortly after. But I think the reason it died was because it was a bit too early. Had it been invented when parkour came about, I feel like the two would have been hand in hand. Like, you'd wear a pair of soap shoes and do parkour. The problem with soaps was that people did a grind and then that was it, because they didn't do anything else. But as some of you might know, the soap shoe has actually returned in 2022. A company called Epic Grind Shoe has just put out their version. And already we're seeing people like Bob Reese do incredible things with a pair of grind shoes. I genuinely think this could add a whole new angle to the world of parkour that I just cannot wait to see. Epic Grind Shoes actually gave me an affiliate link, which was really cool of them, so use that in the description below, and please send me your clips of you guys using it. I really want to see this new wave in parkour. And there you have it. Be sure to like this video and subscribe to the channel, and watch this video right here.